Hello, future watchers slash listeners. Today I am joined by Ashley and by SHEESLEY, and we are going to be talking about tower narratives and tower rescue narratives, maybe more specifically, through a disability lens, which I'm super duper excited about because this is actually something that has come up multiple times in my, like, ever since Artifice and Access came out, people have like spoken to me about tower narratives, and I was like, you guys are right. We need to talk about this and we need to think about it like more specifically through a disability lens because I think the context of like rescue narratives and like agency and stuff really changes when you look at it through like intersectionality, right?
Yeah.
And like disability specifically. So Ashley, please tell us who you are, where you're from, what the vibe is disability wise today. Are we struggling with symptoms? Are we feeling good? What's the vibe?
So I'm Ashley. You can call me Ash. I am a disabled kidlit author. I am if in the Artifice and Access Disability and Fantasy anthology that Ella put together. My short story in that one is Hope Be It Never So Faint, which is a sapphic Robin Hood retelling. I also have a book coming out in February called Child of the Dragon, and it's a young adult contemporary fantasy that's kind of like if Aragon took place in the modern day, but instead of a boy finding a dragon egg, a girl discovers she is a dragon. Chaos ensues. I'm feeling pretty good today. It's been a high fatigue day. I didn't think I was actually going to make it through the workday, but then I did, and I felt okay since. I'm on a little high right now, so I'll take that.
I feel like fatigue is one of those symptoms that is just unpredictable almost because I
Yeah.
always have this with my partner, right? Where I'm like, oh, I don't know if like I have a lot of if I'm gonna be able to stay up late tonight. And then like we'll just start talking and I'm like, wow, okay, suddenly I have so much energy. We're fine.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, like water. It's fluid.
Yes.
Science things. But yeah, so I am Ella T. Holmes, and I am just a general writer of things, I think is like the best way to define what I do. So I tend to write like essays, nonfiction essays, and fantasy is probably my favorite genre, although I have been recently dabbling in like contemporary, what I would call chill horror. So a lot of my
Ooh.
stories will have like a horror premise, like, oh, what if all of the men in the world just were suddenly compelled to go fishing, and if they didn't catch any fish, they died. But instead of like focusing on how horrific that would be, I'm just kind of like, what if the story were about like, a marriage falling apart? Because that's like more sort of compelling to me. I don't know, like people adapting to different circumstances and conditions,
Mhm.
right? But yeah, so today I'm really excited to be talking about this topic because as I said, it's like super interesting and it's come up quite a few times. And I guess my first question to start off this conversation would be, what are your like initial general thoughts about the sort of like tower rescue narratives and how it relates to like disability or have you had any like disability specific thoughts when thinking about it?
I think my first thought with it is that I like it when it centers the like consent and autonomy of like a disabled person. And like I also would prefer like if someone is rescuing a disabled person and the story's written by a disabled person, because otherwise that might feel a little saviorism-y. But yeah, I feel like so many disabled people, I mean, disabilities disable you, and there's so many times that like I need help. I need like a rescue. And so I like the stories that let us play with the idea that like we are like that people would want to rescue us, and like want to rescue us in the way that we want to be rescued. Like obviously, like if you offer help to a disabled person and they say no thank you, then like that's the end of the conversation. But like if they ask for help, then let them have help. And I yeah, I think that was something I thought about, was that like I really like the idea of being able to like imagine a like fantasy world in which you can still have caregivers and you can still have people who would go to the ends of the earth to find you. And like I really like that idea with this, with a like tower narrative, a rescue narrative through disability lens.
This is actually really interesting to me because this isn't something that I wrote in my notes, but as you were talking, I was like, oh my God, what if? And I'm kind of thinking about how, like, so often, like with a tower rescue narrative, right? The idea of the narrative is we must liberate this person from the place that they've been trapped in, I guess. But now I'm thinking, like, what if the tower is not really a place where the person is like trapped or only trapped, but what if the tower is like a site of resistance or a site of safety? Or what if, like in these COVID times, right, the tower is actually the safest place to be?
Hmm.
Or I don't know, now I'm kind of going off of my own sort of like a headcanon fan fiction type thing where I'm like, what if the prince like ascends the tower and then the princess or whoever is like in there is like, no, I don't want to leave. Like this place is really good. I have my routines. The temperature is really comfortable. There's no noise pollution. Like what if, yeah, like what if the tower was a site of just like comfort? And the disabled character in question has a lot of agency and I guess like say in whether or not they get to leave,
Yeah.
want to leave even. Yeah. Now I kind of want to write this, but we have conversations to have. What's my other thought? I'm so sorry.
You're good.
Me disability wise, brain fog is so bad in the morning. But
Understandable.
like I guess my thinking now is in relation to what you've said, like what if the person in the tower had a lot more agency in being confined or um, weren't rendered as like helpless or passive because I'm kind of thinking about, I don't know, I guess like Fiona from Shrek, because I'm a big Shrek
Yeah.
lover, is like her defining sort of thing in the beginning of the story is very much like, oh, she's a princess in a tower. And it's like, what does she even do? She has been there since she was a little girl. And I'm just like
Mhm.
also thinking about how like I'm so sorry if I'm like steamrolling this. I just have a lot of
No, you're
thoughts.
good.
You've opened the can of worms, but I guess I'm thinking about how like potentially disabling being trapped in a tower and being like so heavily isolated
Uh-huh.
could be, right? Like I'm just kind of imagining like how, I don't know,
Have you
where's
read
my
A Dance
princess with
of Lies?
depression?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I was gonna say, have you read A Dance of Lies yet? Because that's the like premise for how the main character becomes disabled is that she was imprisoned for so long and like was just like confined in such a t tight space that like her body kind of deteriorated. And the disability in question very much mirrors the author's experience with POTS dysautonomia, I think EDS as well. But like that was the like triggering event for it was being confined and
Yeah. No, I haven't read that yet, but now I'm
so
like,
good.
I
So
must
good.
because I feel like that's like I'm really struggling to like pick my words because I don't want to make it seem like I'm being like everybody sucks when they write these narratives
Oh
because
yeah,
it's not
no,
about that
like
at all. But I really, really love like I want more people to be like, yeah, there would actually be like bodily consequences and mental health consequences of being so heavily like isolated and confined to like a small space and like probably not eating the best. Like I'm just imagining
yeah.
like, yeah. Oh, there are so many
I think
things.
there's a lot that could be explored with the tower itself, with the like being confined, with needing a rescue or wanting a rescue or maybe not wanting a rescue. And I think one of the things that I wanted to bring up while we were talking about this is that like it's okay for like stories to not resonate with person like with someone like that's totally fine like if you personally are like oh I didn't really like the way the character was rescued or like I don't like that the character didn't want to be rescued or whatever like that's totally I think that's totally fine and like and kind of talking like the more like metaphysical tower of like the various different things that a character may or may not want to be rescued from and I think yeah I think centering that consent and autonomy of the disabled person, I think, is like the crucial part. Like if from the outside someone is like, oh my gosh, that disabled person looks so sad and miserable, I have to go save them. And then it's like, wait, no, this is my happy place. I don't like you're gonna make things worse. Or if it's like from the point of view of like a disabled person who is like, I need help, and I don't want to be a burden, but I want someone to like want like to like how do I phrase this? Like we're not the burden. We're also but our diseases can be. And I like the idea where of like a rescue narrative in which our loved ones will gladly bear that like the burden of whatever that is, whether or not it's related to our disabilities or not. And like we're worth like it's worth the effort or whatever. Like I like the being wanted and like being worth like like not worthy of rescue because like our worth is inherent, but like having someone else see that, like I like those as well too, where it's like, oh, like obviously there are some issues with like the damsel in distress trope in general, but like having a character where they are not a passive character, but like they still may or may not need help. They still may or may not need caregivers, and being able to like get that in the way that they want it. Like if they want out of the tower, having someone rescue them to the tower. If they don't want out of the tower, maybe having someone bring them some snacks. Like,
Completely agree. And like one of the things that I wrote in my notes in like preparation for this conversation is like how I kind of think actually making the person in the tower disabled and then having like I guess the narrative and the characters go, I'm going to rescue this person feels kind of like subversive in a few ways.
yeah,
Because it kind of is like yes, 100% agree our worth is like inherent to ourselves, right? But also given the history of like ableism
yeah,
and also the history of
exactly.
like how disabled people have been written about, so often disability kind of like basically is like a death sentence, or it might be like one of the reasons people pity you, or it's one of
Yeah,
the things that gets like completely erased in the end. And so for me, reading a story about a disabled person kind of trapped in a tower being liberated by people who care enough to, like meet their needs and be like, what do we need to do to get you out of the tower? Would you even like to get out of the tower? Feels really, really kind of empowering to me.
yeah.
Yeah.
I I kind of been thinking about the way I wrote it because I mean, Hope Be It Never So Faint doesn't have a tower, but like there is kind of this push and pull between like Marion and Robin and like Marion's situation that she's in, where Marion doesn't necessarily need to be rescued. She doesn't want to be rescued, but she's kind of in a situation she doesn't really want to be in, but is okay being in. Like she's like, this is my duty, and like I can be happy in this way. And then it's not until things are kind of settled that she can finally take Robin up on her offer to like go off together and like like go like find a new situation to be in and like and just having that like a person who's willing to be by your side through all of it and like through the various different versions of your tower until you are ready for whatever help you want. And I think just having like partners and friends and family who like in real life are willing to like be with you through the ups and downs of disability and the ups and downs of your like ability as well. Like and I think just yeah, I mean, I think it can have a really strong I don't know. I personally really like writing those kind of like, I mean, they don't even have to be between an abled and disabled person or a disabled and a disabled person, or it could be an abled and abled person. I like writing those stories where someone is loved enough that they are like someone sticks around with them. Like,
Yeah, I feel like those narratives are really beautiful. And like, because I guess I'm kind of thinking like through a disability lens, like
yeah.
when you become disabled or you become chronically ill, there are like a lot of ways that people kind of leave you behind, even when they're
Yeah.
not really trying to, right? And so you might receive less invitations to go out to places, or they don't really take you into account, or they don't sort of adapt, to your accessibility needs or whatnot. So then you miss out on opportunities. And I don't know, they don't consider you or other disabled or chronically ill people like you in terms of like logistics and stuff. So there's like thousands of
Yeah.
ways that we can be excluded, which don't involve like literal towers, but this exclusion is really, it feels really easy to read that from the tower narratives because
Yeah.
while we're like physically present in the world, we're also cut off from it, and we are kind of like witnessing the world around us in different ways. And like the thing is also like even if we're not talking about it through a disability lens, right? Like we all have our specific experiences and traumas and complexes and like I guess like worries about self-worth and stuff. And I think that's why also I really do love tower narratives because it really is
Yeah.
that story of people seeing your worth for what it is and being like, I want to spend time with you. I want to, I don't know, do activities with you. I want to talk with you. I want to, and so there is a real like strong, what is the word? Not connective tissue, but like there's like, I just really love it. And it doesn't even have to be romantic, although I am a sucker for like
Yeah.
romance, right? It's just, yeah, I can see from like ver a lot of different angles why this kind of narrative is appealing. And maybe I kind of feel a little bit like I have read a lot of critiques of the tower narrative, right? Like talking about the trapped person's agency and whether or not they need rescuing and stuff. But one of the things that I have not seen enough of, I think, is this kind of conversation where it's like, okay, but here are the ways in which a tower or a rescue narrative can actually be like a source of empowerment or, like subversion of narratives, right? I'm going to stop now, lest I ramble too long.
No, I agree because one of the thoughts I had written down was about community, because like a tower narrative, a rescue narrative in which it is someone who loves the disabled person enough to rescue them in the way they want to be rescued, like that's just so inherently like builds on like community in like it platonic, romantic, familiar, whatever. But like I think just community is so important for like disabled people and the disabled community and kind of everyone, of course. But like and of course like with other disabled people, like there's like a certain camaraderie that like can only exist between like disabled people that like able people just can't understand unless they've experienced themselves. But like we also need abled allies and we need we need that community and we need people like supporting us. And then another thought I had with like the tower narrative is that like there are disabled people who need care like 24/7 caregivers. And like there's like they're not like they're like yeah, there's definitely like I mean, I don't have a 24/7 caregiver, so I don't want to speak for them, but like they're still worthy. Like they're not a damsel in distress. They're not like like their agency and autonomy is still that's still a central part of those relationships that they have to have and like for it to be healthy. And I think a rescue narrative almost kind of makes the like caregiver role like I don't know, I gives disabled people who need caregivers like a chance to be the main character, you know, like and be able to like see themselves as like not a burden or not some like job that has to be done, but is like something that like someone would love them enough to do. Like again, I don't want to speak for people who have caregivers, live-in caregivers that 'cause I don't have that, but that was something I was thinking about too, is that a lot of disabled folk rely on caregivers in one form or another, and I think that kind of plays into the rescue narrative a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And like I feel like this kind of relates to like what I was saying before about how I've seen a lot of criticisms about the sort of tower narrative, right?
Yeah.
And this is also why I feel like not to like police how people talk about things, but I
Yeah.
do feel like saying like, oh, tower narratives are bad, or like, oh, I guess like having just like a flat judgment of any kind of narrative feels a little bit icky to me because like you are 100% correct. Like uh, how do I word this? I get like a really big sense of like, oh my God, I love this so much when I've read, tower narratives that feature
Yeah.
disabled characters because it is very much coming from a place of like, I have not often felt in my life that I was worth like someone coming to my rescue. And so it has a
Yeah.
very different context when you think about it in terms of like not just like gender, because I feel like that's where a lot of the criticisms
Yeah.
like come from, right? But the intersectionality of, being a person and being disabled and like,
Yeah.
yeah, that just completely changes the context for me personally.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah. And
yeah.
one of the things I was thinking about too was like, would we have this level of criticism about it if, like, would we even say anything if both characters were abled? Like, if it was an able-bodied character who got captured by the enemy or whatever, and their friends and partners or whatever, like their adventuring party traveled to the end of the earth to save them, like, are we would we be sitting here like pulling hairs about whether or not there was enough like consent and autonomy on that? Like, or is and I understand the like I understand the concern because it can come off very much as like saviorism or like, oh, you need an abled person to save you. And it's the same, it's very much like the same concerns that come from like the damsel in distress like uh issues and how it can feel very like infantilizing and like or whatever. But like I think when done well, they can be really, really empowering, like these rescue narratives. And I mean, obviously defending rescue narratives, but like there are bad ones too, and like I don't want to. And yeah, again, if you don't resonate with the rescue narrative personally, then that's totally fine. But I don't think it detracts from a character's. I don't think it inherently detracts from a disabled character's autonomy and like ability to need help. Like disable disabilities are disabling. Like
Yeah, there is like an element here of like being disabled kind of in a lot of ways necessitates help and
yeah,
also like interdependence, right? And so I do think there are ways to construct tower narratives that kind of highlight the strengths and the like love that is can be found, I guess, in that kind of like interdependence and like helping each other. And yeah, like I don't know, it's just such a like juicy field, and I need more people to talk about it because
yes.
like there's so much to be said. And also like one of my notes is about how most, I guess, like tower bound people stories, I guess, hinge on like physical rescue and escape, right? And
Yeah.
a lot of this involves physically demanding tasks like climbing or running or like even like a magical transformation and stuff. And this put me in mind of, and this is a bit of a grim topic, so I'll make sure to put like content warnings before the video, but
Good deal.
it makes me think about how many people with physical disabilities and stuff are very limited when it comes to their ability to evacuate buildings, for example.
Yeah.
And so, like in the case of like apartment buildings being on fire and stuff, you're not supposed to use elevators because the firefighters are using those. Presumably, I don't actually know how it works, but like a lot of the time they're actually told to like stay where they are and wait for rescue because the buildings are not actually equipped to, like handle is not the right word, but they're not equipped to ensure their safety and evacuation like
Yeah.
everybody else, right? And so I do feel like tower narratives in this context feels like, okay, there is someone who is like willing to, like preserve your life and like not leave you behind. And there is
And
something so
presumably also
incredibly,
preserve your dignity while they're doing it.
yeah,
Yeah. Sorry to
exactly.
keep going.
No, oh my God, I was just going to keep rambling about it because I'm like, it angers me to no end that we just have this system in place that's like,
Yeah.
oh, if you're physically disabled, you just need to stay there and wait and like hope that somebody is coming for you. And like, there is no
Or
guarantee
hope
that
that
anyone
there's gonna
is.
be someone strong enough and willing to like carry you down the stairs and like that would like if it's not someone you trust, like that's mortifying. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. I
Also, I just want to add that, like, so many times, like I've seen articles or news stories where it's like, oh, grandson to 87-year-old grandmother like carried her down 12 flights of stairs when the building was on fire. And it's like, wow, he's a hero and stuff. But then what's always missing for me is like criticism of the fact that the building was not set up
yeah.
to like make sure everyone could get in and out safely in the case of an emergency. And so like that this feels like a big thing to me, right? Like I want us to
Yeah.
criticize the systems that made it necessary for, you know, somebody to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's kind of like the this is very grim, but have you seen the post that's like oh, it's a post that's like all of these like feel good stories always sound like child raises $20,000 to stop the puppy shredding machine for 3 months. And it's just like, why is there a puppy shredding machine in the first
Yep.
place? Like,
Yep.
this is not heartwarming. Stop the puppy shredding machine and like, why is it existing? Why did a child have to raise $20,000 to stop it? Like, and
Exactly.
and I think about that a lot every time I see a lot of these, like, oh, like children built yeah like built a prosthetic machine like prosthetic arm out of Legos for the family who couldn't afford it for their kid, and it's like, well, that's a cool concept and like that's cool, but like why couldn't they have afforded the prosthetic arm like themselves? Like they shouldn't have had to rely on their elementary school robotics team to build a prosthetic arm out of Legos. Like they should have access to the arm, like to, to their prosthesis. Like,
Exactly. Like it's really nice that like okay, I can't deny like there is a heartwarming element to that, right? Where I'm like, oh my God, people
of
banded
course.
together and like were able to do this. But yeah, you're so right. Like it shouldn't be necessary. Like this is
Yes.
objectively like a terrible reality
It should
that they've
be
had to adapt to.
it should be like that's like a kid like a elementary school robotics team building a robotic arm out of Legos for one of their friends should be something that they just do for fun because that would be cool and not out of like a necessity. Like, and I think rescue narratives have an opportunity to kind of poke at that a little bit. If I mean if that's what the writer wants to do, but like yeah, is have this like underlying of like why was this in place in a way that required a rescue? Like why were they trapped in the first place?
Yeah. Not to bring up Shrek again,
Of
but
course.
unfortunately I
We can
must.
always bring up Shrek.
I'm just kind of like one thing I've always respected Shrek for is the fact that in the second movie he calls out Fiona's dad and is like, "You locked your child in a tower. Like, what were you thinking?"
Yes.
Um, and I'm like, "Yeah, what was he thinking? Like, that is so incredibly just like out of all of the things you could have possibly done to keep it secret, right?" And
Yeah.
I know there's like fairy tale logic and you know, a I can't remember if it is actually confirmed that it was fairy godmother or not, but like I know that the story kind of says she must go in the tower or whatnot. But like
Yeah.
alone, like
Yeah.
I don't know. I just have so many
Yeah.
thoughts.
Yeah. And
But I
I
do love that.
feel like like you, yeah, put the tropes in, but like subvert them, poke fun at them, like call attention to the fact that they're kind of messed up. Like, why did you hate your child so much that you put him in a tower? Like, why did they end up in a tower in the first place? Like, why is there a tower?
Also, why is there a tower and like a big dragon? And like
Yeah.
it's kind of like once you okay, I'm just gonna acknowledge the fact that I think some people are of the opinion that like yeah, when you like get into the nitty-gritty and stuff, like these things just fall apart and you're not supposed to sort of, I
Yeah.
guess, engage with it that way.
Suspension of
However,
disbelief.
I must. Um, but I am kind of thinking about how like I guess like in Shrek, for example, right? It's a dragon guarded tower. And what we see in the first movie is like all of these dead bodies and skeletons and like a recipe book for like cooking a night and like all of that sort of stuff. So I'm like, not only is Fiona relegated to a life in a tower until she's liberated by Prince Charming or Shrek, as the case may be, it's like, would it not be deeply traumatizing to be living in a castle where literally everyone who comes to rescue you is like burnt to a crisp or made into like dragon soup or so now we're back to like the how being in a tower even if you are like well fed and all that sort of stuff I
Yeah.
feel like it almost it's like the perfect environment to develop disabilities or conditions like depression and anxiety and
Yeah.
I don't know like CPTSD perhaps
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Might be a little traumatizing, I guess.
yeah like just a little and I mean like this also makes me think of Frozen because Frozen is actually an interesting one to me because
Yeah.
what's her name? Elsa creates her own tower, right? In essence, she isolates herself and she goes away and she builds this big ice castle and it's amazing. And then you have Anna who comes in and is like, my sister is in need of rescuing. I need to bring her home and like all of that sort of stuff. And so, yeah, now I'm thinking about what you've said about like consent and autonomy and all of that sort of stuff, right? And yeah, I don't think I really have a big point to make about Frozen. That's one of the brainworms that's happening right now.
And that one's kind of tricky because like Elsa also like thought she was doing what was best for everyone else. And so like there was an element of like self-sacrifice to that was a little bit like misguided because like but like yeah because that requires her to like that was like several layers of consent and autonomy deep that you have to kind of dig before you could get to like Elsa's like actual feelings about being in that tower like And I think, yeah, like that. I mean, that's totally also very valid to explore through a disability lens as well, I think. Like, I mean, there are reasons that we may feel we need to stay in the tower, even if we maybe don't want to. Like, and maybe we don't technically have to, but like the way society has been set up, it's just safer there. Like, I think, yeah, I think it could be really fun to that can also be really fun to play with through a disability lens as well. One of
Yeah.
my cats has joined me. You can see his
Oh,
fluffy tail.
oh my God, look how fluffy that tail is.
He's a very, very fluffy boy. And he's
Oh,
gonna sit on my pillows just behind me, where I
that's,
can't quite reach him.
I don't know. Did you have more to say about that or?
I was kind of thinking, and I'm pulling thoughts out of the air, so if these don't make sense, we could cut it in post. I was thinking about how like part of the reason Elsa was in her tower was also because of like the way the world kind of perceived magic and like especially like once she was like forcibly removed from her tower and then revealed to have magic and then like she couldn't come home until that was kind of addressed. And I think that's something too with like a lot of just like being disabled in general is that a lot of people would rather we just stay inside. And so I think that's another thing with like the rescue narrative is that like addressing some of those systemic inequalities and like prejudices and whatever. And like, not that every disabled person has to write that narrative, but like, I think being like, you like that's just another angle you can take a rescue narrative from is like, can you can you truly leave the tower if you're not wanted outside of the tower? Like if like but then also if you're not wanted outside of the tower, is it not then an act of rebellion to leave the tower? And like and like the like a positive like is it like not revolutionary to leave the tower? And I think playing with both of those in equal measure can be really interesting. And also, not that every disabled character has to prove to the world that they're worth having in society. Like that's not that's not requirement for it. It's just a fun little element that could be played with. Is was something I was thinking about was just systemic inequalities and systemic ableism that might contribute to a rescue narrative.
The thing that that's making me think about is how, like, I read a quote and I'm probably going to paraphrase it really poorly, but the general idea was that, like, choice is kind of illusory. I can not say that word, right? Like, under oppression. And so, uh, I'm I recently finished reading The Minority Body Theory of Disability by Elizabeth Barnes, and in that she kind of talked about something that I'd never heard of before called like adaptive preference. And so it's this kind of idea of like when it comes to Elsa, right? Like because of the way that she was raised and how she was conditioned to sort of like be ashamed of and afraid of her magic and like she has internalized this idea that, you know, she's a danger to everyone. Her preference is to literally run
Yeah.
away, isolate herself, and build a huge ice castle, right? And so, like, it is interesting to think about how, yeah, like that is kind of an adaptive preference. And so, this kind of opens up another can of worms of like, we should absolutely 100%, you know, like believe disabled people and listen to what they are telling us. Um, and I don't want to use the word but I'm afraid I'm going to have to. But like there is also this element here for me of like, okay, but
Yeah,
taking in, you know, like the oppression and like ableism and all of that sort of stuff into account, what is actually informing this decision that they've made? Um,
exactly. Okay, but can we talk about K-pop demon hunters through a disability lens now? Like,
oh my God. I have so many thoughts about this, about K-pop Demon Hunters specifically.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, it is like a really good example or like case study of this, like,
Yeah. Yeah, because she was I mean Rumi was raised with this like repetition of like our faults and fears can never be known and like I have to keep this hidden because it's dangerous and the people I'm closest to will hate me for this. And so I have to keep covered. I have to keep hidden. I have to like stay in my tower. And it's not until like I mean, she didn't really have a choice when it was time to come out, but like that's still just like a very like how much of our like there's just like so much of the like disabled experience that's just like stay inside. Like you can't be here because it's not accessible, and it's not accessible because we don't want you here. Like, and I think just yeah, having just I don't know, like it's just so interesting how much we are forced to kind of comply with the way society wants to perceive us.
Yeah, because there's like also like the other thing I'm thinking of is like autistic masking, right?
Yeah,
Um, and so it's kind of like in this conversation, I'm realizing that the tower, it can be literally anything. Like it can be the tower of your own, sort of mind or whatnot. Because yeah, like as an autistic woman, there are so many times where I'm like genuinely feeling like I have to mask my autistic traits, for the comfort of non-disabled people.
yeah,
And also like that leaves me feeling incredibly sort of like, I guess, like apart from everyone else, right? So even though we might be sitting across each other from a table or like something, like we're literally sharing space, I still feel very much like, oh no, I'm sort of
in
like
the tower.
tra yeah, exactly. And I also like, because you brought up K-pop Demon Hunters, I'm just gonna like read the paragraph that I wrote
Yeah.
in my notes, because I feel like this is related really strongly. But I wrote, I feel like with tower narratives, I'm having thoughts. This is how I talk to myself in notes. I'm having thoughts about how these narratives will center or make use of situations and conditions that disabled and chronically ill people are really familiar with, but they present it in ways that kind of go, oh my God, what if this happened? And then I, as
Yeah.
a disabled person, am like, well, that happened to me last Tuesday, or I was actually raised that way. So this is not like a potential hypothetical, worst case scenario. This is just kind of my
Yeah.
life. Um, and so I actually mentioned Frozen in here, which is why it's on the brain. But like,
Uh-huh.
stories like Frozen feature non-disabled heroines in situations such as being told to hide their condition, and then they develop internalized shame and fear about the way they differ from like social norms and the people around them. And then they're also seen as like dangerous and unpredictable. And these are all things that disabled people have been experiencing throughout history.
Yeah.
Um, and then there's also the issue of like Gothic novels. I don't know how many of them you've read that feature, sort of like the mad woman that's locked up in a room, like the ex-wife, or the mother who went sort of
Hmm.
like quote crazy and stuff. So they are locked up and they are like obviously heavily isolated and don't have a lot of agency and autonomy and all of that sort of stuff. And so like with all of these narratives, I'm like, these feel like tower narratives to me now, because we're making a metaphor of it. But my last sort of thought was that, oh yes, this was, then I started complaining because I was like, the worst part for me is probably not only that, these stories kind of make use of what is really familiar or relatable to like disabled and chronically ill people, but it's the fact that even in these stories, like none of these characters are ever sort of given like there's a notable absence of disabled characters, right, in these
Yeah.
stories. And also worst of all to me is like, okay, we make use of like disability culture, if you will, or the disabled experience, but then in the end it's like erased or cured, or you know,
Yeah.
it's almost overcome in a way that kind of makes me feel like, oh, okay, so the obstacle in this story was just like the individual as opposed to like the wider world that caused, the internalized
Yeah.
shame and the isolation and all of that. So
Exactly.
yeah, then I had thoughts about how, I don't know, I feel like this kind of reinforces the idea that disability is kind of incompatible with, like happy endings or like romance and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, which is ridiculous because like we can still have happy endings, but the happy ending they want is for us to be freed from every tower. And like some towers aren't freeable. Like uh yeah, but one thing I was thinking about just now while you were talking about how like the disability narrative, like we have so many different versions, or not the disability narrative, but the tower narrative, we have so many versions where there is kind of an inherent disability lens through which to view it through. You could also view it through like a queer lens or like all these other sort of like lenses of oppression, but they're very rarely ever written with an oppressed, like through an oppressed lens. Like for, and so I think, I mean, I heard, like, I've heard it a lot for like queer authors and like queer stories and like BIPOC authors with BIPOC stories is that like they're like a trope isn't dead, like it can't like we can't keep calling a trope dead as soon as disabled people pick it up, as soon as Black authors pick it up, as soon as queer authors pick it up, because like we haven't had a chance to put our own spin on it. And there are so many like tower rescue stories, and not very many of them are through a disabled lens. And I think we should let disabled people put our own spin on it before we can decide if the trope is problematic or dead or not. Like, yeah, I think we should be allowed to write the narratives that able people have beat to death. Like, I think we should be allowed to like try it ourselves. Like,
Yeah, I feel like there is such a wealth of like not even like stories and ideas and stuff, but just like yeah, there's just a wealth of like everything that I feel like is kind of like I get sad thinking about, like I've also seen this, right, where it's like, oh, okay, the popularity of this trope is kind of like it's tired, it's dead, like we don't want any more of this. And I'm like, hang on, but if a disabled, author wrote this with like disability justice in mind or something, we would have a completely different story. And so it
yeah.
just feels very like, it feels almost like, I don't know, non-disabled people kind of like they have a toy and then the novelty wears off and they're like, okay, this is done for everyone. And I'm like, no, 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 it's my turn.
Yes. Yes.
I need more, I need more. Yeah, because like you're correct, I think, in the whole like, it feels like an issue of like, okay, we have non-disabled people making use of like disability themes or like narratives or whatnot, but because it's still coming ultimately from the body mind of like a non-disabled person,
Yeah.
yeah, there's like a whole range of things that are just not thought of or not taken into consideration, and that would like really heavily change the narrative for me. So I am
Yeah.
100% on board with saying no tropes are ever dead, and also disabled writers, please write more, because
Yes.
I need them.
Disabled people writing about being believed and wanted and helped in the way we want to be believed and wanted and helped can be a really, really great escape for the authors and for readers. And it allows us to imagine a world where we can be the center of a rescue and we're worth rescuing, kind of coming back to that from the beginning again. And I think letting us write these tropes that have maybe been deemed problematic or deemed overdone or whatever, I think let us have our turn with it. Like,
I agree. Let us have our turn. And also, I'm just, yeah, really thinking about this idea of like the right to rescue or the right, like also ideas around like who is considered a social and economic burden and like things like that.
yeah,
And this is like a slight tangent, but because I have chronic migraines and stuff, I've been, like reading a bunch of sort of like medical research things to see what might give me some like pain relief or help me manage it. And it is absolutely bananas the number of times I have encountered opening sentences in abstracts and stuff where it's like, oh, people who suffer migraines are like a burden on the economy. It is costing the world
yeah,
millions of dollars to like treat this condition. And I'm like, okay, but what about like centering the experience first and like having some
yeah,
compassion for the people who are suffering it? Because yeah, it's like linguistic things and ideas like that that just reinforce the idea that, you know, it costs everybody so much to like keep us alive and keep us safe when I don't actually think that that's the important thing here. I think it's
yeah,
caring about other people,
yeah.
and valuing their life.
So I got sick from COVID in 2020. Very, very beginning of the pandemic. I was working as a virologist, and I was still working as a virologist up until February of this year when I changed to a different field. But I was working as a virologist and had just applied for a Master's of Public Health program. And that was something I had noticed while reading papers about the burden of disease is the phrase that's used across the medical field. And it is often like And I remember coming across it over and over again during my like master's program while I am like newly disabled and newly like feeling very much like a burden. Um, and just finding this over and over again. And like, I remember talking to a friend about like how uncomfortable I was with that. Because it's like it frames like I understand why. Because like politicians and rich people and whatever, they don't want to spend money for things that they're gonna lose money on later. Like they're much more willing to spend money on things that they can see return on investment. So if we can frame it in our research that like this is going to save the government money in the long term, this is going to make medical companies more money in the long term. Like this is going to give businesses more employees for longer. I can see I understand the appeal of that a lot. I do. But like it is very rarely ever framed in the like it's always framed on like the economic burden or the like employment burden or whatever, and it's rarely ever framed as the like burden on us, and like rarely ever framed as like it's rarely ever like assured that like we ourselves are not the burden. Like, and I like so yeah, I don't know if there's like a fix for that that isn't a massive systemic change, but like yeah, I think I have a lot of feelings on that because I understand academically why that's the like phrasing that's used, but I feel like it is just I feel like it can lead to the stigma around disability and chronic illness that I feel like is kind of overlooked. And yeah, and I mean maybe that's maybe why I like rescue narratives so much is because we've said it already, but like the like so many disabled people feel like a burden and like they're burdened or we're a burden to our loved ones, we're a burden to society. And like the rescue narrative allows us to imagine a world in which we're either not the burden or, I mean, we're seen like our disease is seen as the burden. And even if we are a burden, we are a burden worth carrying. And like, it's like, you like, even if it is work to save us, it's like worth the effort. Like, and yeah, that's it. I don't know how to draw my conclusion here. Just disabled people are worthy of love.
Yep, that's it. That's the message. But also, like, yeah, I completely agree with, like, yeah, just like speaking about the medical papers and stuff. Like, one of the ones that angered me the most was that the opening line was basically like, oh, people who suffer migraines, are a social and economic burden costing the world millions of dollars. And then the next line was like, sort of acknowledging the fact that it causes a lot of pain. And I was sort of like,
Yeah.
now, why wasn't that the first sentence? Because I feel
Yeah.
like it's not that I want us to disregard like how much things cost and stuff, because
Yeah.
I also see like where that's coming from, but I'm also like, how about we center the people first
Yeah.
instead of
Yeah.
being like,
Or if we're gonna talk about the burden, like the economic burden, let's say the like migraine disorder costs the like not the people, like it's not the people's fault. I would
yeah,
not have this disorder if I had a choice, trust me. Like,
exactly. And also, what about my economic burden? Because my medication costs me so much money and no
yeah.
one wants to talk about it.
Yep. Yep. The crypt tax, as it were.
Hmm.
It was actually
My
my first non-scientific publication was I got a paper published. It was like a narrative essay last summer published that was about like the how much it costs to be disabled and like yeah, I I was surprised by the number of people who came back and they were like, "Well, it cost me so much more." And I was like, "Did you miss the point of the essay?" But yeah, like there's just like people don't tend to realize how expensive being disabled is on the disabled person. Like, yeah, it's expensive to society, but like it's so much more like it hurts me out of pocket more than it will ever hurt you. Like,
Exactly. And it's not even just like money, right? It's also like there is this constant game of maths that I think a lot of us play of like, okay, well, if I go out for breakfast today, I'm going to be completely wiped by the afternoon. And so like, you have to make all of these decisions to like prioritize things. And that like non-disabled people just don't have to think of because they have a lot more energy.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I I had another thought where it's kind of like I like linking it back to the whole tower thing, right? Like there is a kind of idea happening in my brain where it's like your disabilities can kind of become a tower or like because yeah, like I I'm trying to figure out how to word this sentence, but there are so many times where I felt like really isolated and alone and stuff because of the fact that I'm having like a chronic pain flare up, right? And so it's
Yeah.
like it's not exactly my choice to be alone in a dark room, not talking to
Yeah.
anyone, but that is the like reality that I live. And in this in that kind of like situation, yeah, it would be really nice to have someone like come over and be like, "Oh, hey, I cooked you soup." Or,
Yeah.
d is this a day where you need to be inside in the dark, or, do you need someone to go on a walk outside with you for like 15 minutes so you could touch some grass? Like that would mean that means so much to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, so basically, in conclusion, I'm a lover of tower narratives now, and I see their value and I want us to, I don't know, maybe and by us I just mean everyone in general, be like a little bit more open-minded maybe because like yes,
Yeah.
there are a lot of things to be critical of when it comes to these narratives. But also mayhap there are things of worth in it. Um, I think also like maybe one of my final thoughts on this topic is like how often and I'll specify fairy tales here because I feel like the tower narrative, like
Yeah.
I've encountered it a lot in fairy tales specifically, but fairy tales often equate, like beauty with virtue and like goodness, right? And
Mm-hmm.
like good morality. And like beauty is also often specifically like non-disabled. Like you are beautiful if you are able-bodied and I guess like
Mm-hmm.
symmetrical and like have a good heart and things like that.
Yeah.
And so I think like when it comes to talent narratives and disability, I think it could be really subversive to have the I'm just going to use fairy tale like lingo here, but like to have the beauty in the situation be, like a disabled person because it challenges like all of these aesthetic ideals that we've had in fairy tales and that have carried through to our contemporary media. Um, because and like yeah, I feel like it would also challenge these ideas that we have around disability being like taboo or being indicative of like immorality or evil
Yeah.
or like all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, I think those are all of my thoughts.
I
Otherwise, I'll
think
go
that,
on forever.
yeah. I think my one last thought I just had was that like we talked about all the things that like could be critical and like the ways that like we can subvert things, but like I think it's also important to note that like no disabled author is going to be perfect and nor should we expect perfection from anyone really, but like from like a disabled author trying to play with these tropes and stories in a way that's meaningful for them, like it's not always going to be perfect for everyone. Like not like for it like it may have been perfect for that author and it maybe is not perfect for anyone else and it might not it might be perfect for a lot of people and then there are still going to be people who aren't happy with X, Y, or Z or whatever. And I think just yeah, we can't expect perfection and I don't think we need perfection. I think there's
Also,
yeah.
yeah, like perfection is kind of like a made up thing.
Yep.
Like it's not really attainable. I don't think it's a sustainable goal. And also just given how like varied and like different, people are in general,
Uh-huh.
like no two people with the exact same disabilities are going to experience those same disabilities in the exact same way. And so I
Yes.
think, yeah, the whole uh what's the word that I'm looking for? I guess like yeah, I want to be really mindful and acknowledge the fact that disabled people are not a monolith. And actually, there are a lot of stories and like experiences and things that I think we can encounter as like readers or consumers. And we can have some maybe like bad feelings about, but also I like really respect them, uh, especially when they come from like disabled or chronically ill authors, because I'm like,
Yeah.
this is coming from a
You have so
specific
few of
perspective,
them.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want there to be room for all of the stories. It's
Hmm.
like, I
If
think,
able people are allowed to write bad stories, we should be allowed to write bad stories.
yeah, exactly. Like, I'm just thinking about the cure narrative, right? Where it's like, oh, the disability cure, I mean,
Hmm.
and how often that's been criticized. And I 100% understand the criticisms and
Oh
all that
yeah.
sort of stuff. But I am also of the belief that, like, if a disabled or chronically ill person wants to write a cure narrative and they want to live in that power fantasy, then they should have the right to do that. Um,
Yeah.
I know like having chronic migraine sucks, having EDS and autism sucks sometimes as well. And some days I am genuinely like, okay, if a disability cure fairy came along, would I take up, the offer to be
Yeah.
cured? And sometimes I genuinely think like, yeah, I would because
Yeah.
it would make life easier. But yeah, so
Sometimes I don't want
I
to
will
hurt
never
so bad.
judge. Yeah, exactly. Oh, how
Yeah.
dare you not want to be in pain and suffer all the time? That is
I
so
know.
unreasonable of you.
A wimp.
Um, but yeah, I feel like those are all of my like thoughts about the tower narrative so far, but
Yeah.
I would be actually so hyped to like revisit this topic in like a few months to see if we have like developed any more thoughts. And
Yeah.
now I also feel like I'm gonna have to do a big research thing of like, okay, let's see if any disabled or chronically ill authors have sort of like written, tower narratives and then see what they've done. Because
Yeah.
yeah,
This was fun.
it was fun. Yeah, thank you so much for talking to me about it and also being so enthusiastic about the topic.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it was really fun to yeah, there's not much out there that like really like delves into this from a disability lens, and so I kind of felt a little bit like I was floundering a little bit for a few times where because I was like maybe I'm not going to sit phrase this perfectly or in a way that makes sense or that everyone else is going to like resonate with, but I was like but these are my thoughts and I'm going to own them.
Yeah, no, I feel exactly the same way. I feel like there's like a huge responsibility, I feel, when like talking about this sort of stuff, because yeah, I don't want to imply that disabled people are a monolith, and I don't want to imply that
Yeah.
one story is better than the other or that people are doing the wrong thing, and I don't want to accidentally use non-inclusive language. And yeah, so I'm there with you in that kind of like fear of floundering or like feeling like we're floundering. But
Mhm.
no, I feel like this was really good. And I just want to ask, for like the closing out, did you want to tell us where we can find you on like social media and
Yeah.
pre-order your book and all of that sort of stuff?
Yeah. So I'm on most social medias as at Ash in the Ashes. Um, and so yeah, I'm on Twitter with at Ash Shees, but because Ash in the Ashes was taken, but I'm not really on Twitter anymore. But so you can find me Bluesky, Instagram, Threads there for that. I'm on Tumblr as Chronically Dragons if you want to find me there. My book, you could find Child of the Dragon. You could add it on Goodreads already. It's not been fed out to major retailers yet for pre-order, but you could go to the Inked and Gray website. I can find the actual link and send it to you. And pre-orders are up if you want to order directly through my publisher, which is cool because you can support a small press. And then you could also find me in Artifice and Access.
And I will make sure all of the links to like your socials and the publisher and all of that are in the description box so everyone can find it very easily. And yeah, let's do this again
Yeah, for
sometime
sure.
soon.
Yes.